area where the young man's abandoned vehicle was discovered several days after he went missing.
How could his scent just completely vanish? This theory sounded like an excuse for the police. It's like they know he's not coming back. Some missing person cases end up with a brave girl escaping the clutches of an evil monster. Others end up with the police discovering a tragedy, a body buried in a shallow grave. Others, well, they don't end at all. As of 2022, people are still searching for Tyler Stice. And the more they look for answers, the more questions they find. On June 21st, 2016, Tyler was 20 when he made himself a sandwich and left for work. That's when he vanished without a trace. His parents seemed worried, his sister even more so. But then a lot of things happened. There are a lot of twists to this story, and the truth behind Tyler's disappearance might be very, very dark. Does Tyler have a secret life away from his questionable family? Or is his family at the center of his mysterious story? Watch on to learn about the secret life of the 20-year-old who's been missing for 6 years. Tyler Stice's story begins like any other. He was born in 1996 to parents Stephanie and Robert Bryan, or if you ask him, just Bryan. Stephanie also had an older daughter from a previous marriage, Jessica. She and Tyler were best buddies. As far as people knew, the Stices were a happy family. They lived in a big house in Kingman, Arizona. It's a tiny town of 30,000 people filled with pretty sceneries and great spots to wine and dine along the historic Route 66. According to friends and family, Tyler was very close to his family, and he was a pretty shy person. This meant that you'd almost always find him indoors playing video games or researching his passions. Indeed, just because he was introverted doesn't mean he didn't have a rich life. He loved photography, cross-country, and pretty much every form of art out there. Digital and hand-drawn, writing, poetry, and music. That's right, Tyler was a part of his school's band. Talking about school, Tyler's schoolmates and teachers remember him as a bright student and a warm, kind person. Almost flawless. He never got into any conflicts or brawls and always got good grades. He was focused, and his family was proud of him too. In all respects, it seemed like Tyler was going to make it big in life. But oftentimes, not everything is as it seems. In 2015, Tyler enrolled in a community institution in Kingman in preparation for applying to Flagstaff University. His biggest dream was to fly drones for the police. But he couldn't just afford to dream and study. He had to work too, as if he already had some pretty serious expenses. He had a black Ford Mustang, which he was really passionate about. He'd drive it everywhere he went, and he would care for it, so that it never had a scratch or an ounce of dust on it. Then he also had to pay rent. He did live with his parents, but Stephanie would ask for rent in order to motivate her son to work and learn the value of money. Tyler began working at a local Wendy's, and then moved on to a toilet paper company. In May 2016, he switched jobs again. This time, he started working at a furnishings company in Kingman. He was a good employee. He was punctual and always courteous with the customers. But Tyler would only work there for a month. Something would change drastically in Tyler's mind. On June 19th, 2016, Tyler finished work, said goodbye to his colleagues, and went over to his Ford Mustang. But he didn't drive home as usual. No. This time, he headed to the nearest Walmart and got himself a .22 caliber rifle. Then, he needed ammo. But he went to a different store for that. This might not be a shocking piece of information for an American, but this was so unlike Tyler. He wasn't the outdoorsy type, nor was he into hunting. Guns didn't lie around at home, and they weren't the topic of any conversation within the family. Tyler buying a gun was a very strange turn in his life, but at the time, no one knew this. He simply returned from the store and had his rifle in his bedroom. But nothing would be the same after this. The next day, on June 20th, Tyler skipped work for the very first time in his life. His mother noticed this. After all, she'd seen her son every day, and she knew skipping work was unlike him. So that morning, she asked him if he was all right. Tyler said he just needed some time to himself, to think some things over. This was a good enough answer for Stephanie. She didn't want to press her son. He was an adult after all. After eating, Tyler left the house for a few hours. Then he came back and spent the rest of the afternoon with his dad, Brian, doing some work outside. After dinner, Tyler went to his room as usual, and no one batted an eyelid over his behavior. Needing some time to think is perfectly normal, and apart from skipping work, Tyler did nothing out of the ordinary, at least not in front of his parents. The next morning, Tyler woke up together with the sun, as per usual. By 5:30 a.m., he was ready to leave for work. He packed his lunch and left with his Ford Mustang. His mother saw him leave for work and thought nothing of it. But little did she know this would be the last time she would see her son. This would be the last time anyone would see Tyler. In the afternoon, Stephanie got a distressing call. It was Tyler's manager wondering why he would be skipping work 2 days in a row. Stephanie's heart sank. As far as she knew, Tyler was at work. He'd even packed a lunch. He wasn't home, so why did he leave the house so early if not to go to work? The manager was certain that Tyler was not just being lazy. He had been an exemplary employee until that week. Stephanie also knew her son to be very serious, reliable, and punctual. She knew something was awfully wrong. She called Tyler, but all her calls would go straight to voicemail. She then proceeded to call all her relatives. Perhaps Tyler had run off to be one of his family members, although she was at a loss as to why he would do that. No one knew where he was. Tyler hadn't spoken to his extended family for quite some time. And when it came to friends, well, Tyler's parents didn't really know any of his friends. Tyler didn't have any friends in Kingman. They were all online, people he'd met via games or forums. So there was no one in his friend circle that Stephanie could call. Her last option was to go to the police and file a missing persons report. But there was an issue with that. The Kingman police officers told her she'd have to wait at least 48 hours to file the report. Isn't it pretty outrageous that you have to wait for someone to be gone for 2 whole days before you can report them missing? At the same time, it's a fact that the more time that passes, the less likely it is to actually find the person. Tyler's family waited, helplessly and desperate to hear some news from their son, or at least from the police. Sure enough, on June 25th, they did. The police had located his black Mustang on the Hualapai Mountain Trail in a parking lot at the Deer Canyon Recreation Area.
The area where the young man's abandoned vehicle was discovered several days after he went missing. An isolated nature path near Hualapai Mountains.
It looked like Tyler drove his car there and parked it himself, then headed out onto the mountains. But this was yet another thing that was unlike Tyler Stice. He was not a hiker, nor a lover of the outdoors. The Deer Canyon Recreation Area is a very remote one. You'd only park here if you wanted to hike or stop for a scenic view and perhaps a selfie. There are no houses in the area and nowhere to stay overnight. So the police conducted their typical search of Tyler's car to see if there were any clues pointing to where he may have gone. The first strange thing was that his car was very clean, not like it had been there for 3 or 4 days. It was supposed to be full of cones and needles from the pine trees and dusty, like the earth in that area. Another clue was that none of Tyler's belongings were inside the car. He'd taken his phone, wallet, and keys with him. This meant that he probably left the car of his own volition, and no one forced him out of it. But some of his possessions were still in the car. His camera was in the trunk, and his laptop bag was in the back seat, empty. Then, there was another strange thing in the car, a cup of chai tea in the passenger side door. This was pretty strange. According to his family, Tyler never drank chai tea. In fact, he'd even told them that he didn't like the flavor. Who was he with? The police sent the cup to the lab and it returned with a DNA match. Tyler's. According to the lab results, Tyler was on his own, and that was his drink. But why was it in the passenger side door? Was someone else driving the car? Or had Tyler lied to his family about not liking this drink? It appears like his family didn't know him that well. But this wasn't the only thing that the police analyzed. Next was his camera, the one that he'd left in the trunk of his car. The police went through the photos stored on the memory card and noticed that several of the last photos had been deleted. When the officers told her about this, Jessica had a look at the photos herself. She remembered that some of the deleted pictures were of her and him. They'd gone four-wheeling recently and taken a lot of pictures on that day. Why had he deleted the fun brother and sister moments? What was he trying to hide? And from who? Jessica also noted that Tyler never went anywhere without his camera. So why did he leave it in the trunk? Was he in a rush to leave or to meet someone? The police were about to uncover about a dozen more creepy plot twists. In the following days, Arizona police sent out trained dogs to follow Tyler's scent from his parked car. They revealed his last steps along a natural drainage path in the forest. But there was another strange detail about this. While it wasn't a particularly difficult hike, it was nearly impossible to do it with all of the belongings that Tyler had on him. Jessica even tried to reenact going down that trail with a backpack containing a laptop and everything Tyler was thought to have on him. Her conclusion was that Tyler couldn't have carried everything and walked down that path. At least, not by himself. The dogs traced Tyler's path all the way to a Girl Scout campsite. The path continued toward a main road, but when the dogs reached the road, they stopped. The scent didn't seem to lead anywhere past that point. Did someone pick him up there? How could his scent just completely vanish? Meanwhile, one of Tyler's coworkers rang the police. He'd seen Tyler's Ford Mustang leave the furniture store around 6 a.m. on the morning of his disappearance. However, he couldn't see if Tyler was driving or if he was alone in the car. The police investigators had one thing left to do: a full forensic check of Tyler's car and bedroom. But absolutely nothing raised their eyebrows. So the officers started looking at foul play. Like in most cases, the first suspects were Tyler's immediate family, Stephanie and Brian. They were invited to the police station, questioned, and given polygraph tests. Both of them passed the test, so they were freed. Then the investigators tracked Tyler's online activity. They were hoping for a conversation indicating that he may have left to meet someone. Tyler was indeed signed on to multiple dating websites, and he had some online friends from forums too, but there was zero proof of him meeting anyone outside his house. This is also around the time a private detective called the Stices. He wanted to investigate Tyler's disappearance, and it seemed like he had some valuable leads. The Stice family seemed pretty ecstatic, but the feeling didn't last long. When the Kingman police got word about the detective, they threatened to cut the family from the police's help entirely if they chose to accept the detective's help. According to the police, his methods were dirty, and they didn't want to collaborate with him. Whether this was the real reason or not, we will never know. But the Stices were driven into a corner. They had to pick a side, and the police seemed more reliable, so they let the private detective go. The Stices soon came to think that this was their biggest mistake. A week later, the police declared Tyler Stice a cold case. Their theory? Tyler had run away with a wealthy, older gay man. Wait, what? Were there clues for this? Why did the officers believe this? Stephanie and Jessica were at a loss. In fact, Jessica spoke to the media and said that this theory sounded like an excuse for the police to throw his case and focus on others. If he's an adult and a runaway, the police have no obligation to search for him, right? But not everyone was done with looking for Tyler. In 2017, Explore With Us went to Arizona and spoke to Tyler's family, trying to get to the bottom of this story. But something weird happened. The person who ran Tyler's Facebook page, titled Find Tyler, said his sister was too busy to meet up with them and discuss the case, as they were enjoying the winter holidays. This seemed like way too little interest in Tyler's case, less than a year after his disappearance.
They were too busy with family to talk to us, so I don't know about you guys, but I found that a little odd because I know if somebody in my family was missing and somebody was going to go search for him, I would definitely take the time, even if it's the holiday season, to to talk to them.
But after Explore With Us published their video on Tyler's disappearance, Jessica finally contacted them. Beware, it's about to get very dark. In December 2017, this is what Jessica wrote to Explore With Us.
Jessica was brave enough to share a very personal truth with us. The child who had been the victim of Brian's disgusting crimes was none other than herself.
Wait, what? Did she say she was molested by Brian, her own stepfather? As it turns out, Brian was convicted for immoral and indecent acts with a minor. It was in fact after this conviction and the 16 years he spent in prison that he began calling himself Brian, not Robert. Jessica confessed to something else. Before assaulting her and going to prison for it, he'd also served 2 years in jail for another assault on a friend of hers.
He had served a 2-year jail sentence for doing something heinous to one of Jessica's young friends who was at the Stice house for a sleepover.
Sheesh. Who was this man, and why was he free? Needless to say, Jessica now suspected her awful stepfather of making Tyler disappear. She also suspected her mother of covering it up. After all, this was the woman who somehow still stayed together with Brian even after his 2 prison sentences, even after knowing what he'd done to her own daughter. Jessica's sister, Cassandra, who was also Tyler's half-sister, also said she thought Brian might be involved and Stephanie might be trying to cover for him.
She agreed in Jessica's distrust of Brian and shared in the belief that if he did do something, Stephanie might cover for him.
Throughout the previous 6 months, Jessica had conducted secret searches around the Stice house using a GoPro camera to record the area. She feared discovering Tyler's body in one of the neighboring mine shafts or crevices in the woody area behind their home. There's good reason to believe Tyler's parents have all the bad intentions. As soon as Tyler's Ford Mustang was released from police evidence, Brian started driving it as his own personal car. Then, Stephanie proceeded to focus on her work as if nothing had happened and declined to give any information about Tyler. She never seemed worried or desperate to find her son. Isn't that how a parent should be? And if this wasn't enough, just 2 months after Tyler's disappearance, his parents sold his first car, a Volvo. And believe me, this case is about to get even darker. Jessica had a life of her own. She had a partner, a baby boy, and a dog, and they were living happily somewhere else in Kingman. But one day, in 2013, tragedy struck. A group of landscapers finished their work in her garden, and when they finished, they left the pool gate unlocked. Jessica's baby wandered straight into the pool to his untimely death. She was left heartbroken after this, as any normal mother would. But she used her pain to help others, becoming a vocal figure in anti-drowning awareness. However, she never forgot her pain, and this only came back when she saw just how fast her parents moved past Tyler's disappearance. This was what she wrote. Please don't let this get out, but Tyler's room is completely repainted now and turned into an office. I know from losing a child, it took everything I had to change that room, and she did it so quick. It's like they know he's not coming back. It's true. Why else would you repurpose your child's room, unless you knew for certain they weren't coming back? Sadly, it seemed like no one cared about Tyler's disappearance except his sister. And it's even worse than no one caring. It was more likely that people were actively working to cover something up. Something truly, truly terrible. There was another dark reality Jessica revealed. The police chief in Kingman was working with Stephanie at the hospital where Stephanie was a nurse. Imagine having the police chief as your friend and your husband as the criminal. You could pull some strings, right? Before you dismiss this as a conspiracy theory, think about it. Why didn't the police question Brian more about Tyler's disappearance, knowing his record? He was a registered offender with at least 2 serious offenses. Yet they just gave him a polygraph test and let him go. Finally, Jessica also opened up to Explore With Us about her avoidance over the winter holiday.
Jessica shared that she had been forced to watch her words because during the whole interview, Stephanie was sitting beside her. listening in on everything that came out of Jessica's mouth.
Jessica had spoken to a podcast a few months back, and apparently her mother was very upset that she shared private details about the family. In all respects, she seemed upset that Jessica might get to the truth behind Tyler's disappearance. But Stephanie was more than upset. She set out to destroy her daughter. These messages reveal something truly terrible. During the time when Jessica spoke to Explore with us, Stephanie reportedly coerced Jessica into taking seizure medication, which she hadn't taken in 13 years and was certain she didn't need. Now Jessica complained about having speech and motor problems and not feeling like herself anymore. All of this because Stephanie didn't want her to speak to the media anymore.
Jessica had a chilling theory that Stephanie had deliberately put her on unneeded meds in order to silence her.
Jessica's theory was that Brian forced his son to buy him the rifle. Remember, convicted felons can't buy firearms. So he made Tyler buy the rifle, which he then used to kill him. The motive? Apparently, just a few months before Tyler's disappearance, Jessica had told the reason behind Brian's conviction. It was a pretty shattering moment for Tyler, knowing his father had abused his sister. Jessica believed this information led Tyler to confront his dad, and the rest is history. Before Jessica could share any more information that could lead to finding Tyler, a tragedy struck again. In late 2018, Jessica took her own life. It's unknown whether her family had anything to do with her decision, or just how much they pushed her over the edge prior to the tragedy. But this was her last post on the Find Tyler Facebook page. Don't forget about my brother, Tyler Stice. It's been 2.5 years and still nothing. We will never give up until the day we find you. Don't let him slip from your memory as well. We love you and miss you every day. In one final creepy twist, when Explore With Us contacted Kingman Police about Jessica and shared her distressing messages, the officers simply said she had mental health issues, so taking her life seemed pretty normal to them. Just how corrupted are these police in Kingman? With Jessica gone and Tyler's parents suspicious to say the least, it seemed likely Tyler's case came to a sad close. But believe it or not, there would be yet another bizarre twist in the story. Before Jessica passed away, she said she'd sent Tyler numerous messages on Facebook in the weeks following his disappearance, hoping he'd contact her this way. Nothing happened for months, but then, one day, Jessica noticed that the messages appeared seen. Her heart stopped for a second. Then, she remembered the police also had access to his account. But when she asked the officers whether they'd logged into Tyler's account and read her messages, they denied it. The question is, did the police lie, or did Tyler actually see his sister's messages? Or was it another person who had access to his account? With the third option in mind, Explore With Us revealed that Tyler's DeviantArt account had also been logged into after his disappearance. Then, there was another account on a website called Kira Zatora. This was accessed on the exact day Tyler vanished. On this account, Tyler had an album titled Me, and inside it, there were pictures of a girl. It appeared like this account belonged to a girl. The same girl was on Tyler's Facebook friend list. They'd gone to high school together, and before disappearing, Tyler would show her picture to his work colleagues, claiming she was his girlfriend. This is where Tyler gets weird. His last comment from the Kira Zatora account was that he was drinking tea. This was posted on June 21st, the same day he disappeared. Remember the chai tea the cops found inside his car with his DNA on it? The reasonable conclusion here is that Tyler was catfishing people online, using his ex-classmates' photos. He was never her boyfriend either. Sheesh. There were also Twitter and Facebook accounts named Kira Stice. On Facebook, the job was listed as manager at Wendy's. The link was to the same Wendy's Tyler had worked at in the past. Still, this behavior doesn't explain why Tyler would want to vanish off the face of the earth. Did he want to assume a new identity? Something he had experimented with the previous years? According to Tyler's other half-sister, Cassandra, they talked about disappearing the weekend before he did. Did Cassandra give her brother an idea? But why did he want to disappear and leave his life behind in this way? He could have just moved somewhere new, started afresh. Cassandra is certain Tyler is still out there living a new life, just like the one she dreamed of doing. This makes sense considering Tyler grew up with Brian and Steven. But which theory is it? Cassandra's or Jessica's? Did Brian have something direct to do with his son's disappearing? Or did his awful behavior just make him want to start a new life? And if Tyler really is out there somewhere, is he still in the US? What might he be doing? Hey, thanks for watching. Let us know what you think about Tyler down in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Till next time, and stay safe.